Let me paint you a picture. Someone passes away. They were a good parent, a responsible adult, they had a job, owned a home, had some money saved, and they genuinely loved their kids. The family is already grieving, and then the lawyers show up. Not because anything went wrong exactly, just because nothing was set up. No will, no trust, nothing in writing anywhere that said who gets what, who takes care of the kids, who handles the accounts. And now a judge who has never met this family, never sat at their dinner table, never watched their kids grow up, is making decisions about all of it. Who raises the children, what happens to the house, where the money goes, and when. That scenario plays out in courtrooms across this country every single day, and almost every single time the family says the same thing afterward. We thought we had more time to figure this out. If you have kids and you have been meaning to sort out your estate planning, but it keeps getting bumped because it feels overwhelming or morbid or like something you will handle when you are older, this video is for you. Because today we are breaking down the difference between a will and a trust in plain language. No legal jargon, no judgment, just the real honest information you need to make the right call for your family. And by the end of this, you are going to know exactly which one you need, why, and what happens if you keep putting it off. Let's get into it. First, let's talk about what a will actually is, because a lot of people have a vague idea but not a clear one. A will is a legal document that says what you want to happen to your stuff after you die and who you want to take care of your kids if they are still minors. That is essentially it. It names your beneficiaries, meaning the people who get your assets. It names a guardian for your children if they still need one. And it names an executor, which is just the person you trust to carry out all of these instructions after you are gone. A will is also relatively straightforward to create, does not cost a fortune to set up with an attorney, and is something that most adults can have in place within a few weeks of deciding to actually do it. If you have nothing right now, a will is almost always the right first move, because having something is enormously better than having nothing, and we will come back to exactly why in a few minutes. But here is where the will conversation gets a little complicated, and this is the part most people do not find out until it is too late to do anything about it. A will does not skip probate. Probate is the legal process where a court officially validates your will, reviews your assets, settles any outstanding debts, and then supervises the distribution of what is left to your beneficiaries. It sounds organized because it is organized. What it also is slow, public, and expensive. Depending on the state you live in, probate can take anywhere from several months to well over a year to complete. During that time, your family cannot simply access the assets you left them. They are waiting on the court. The process is also a matter of public record, which means anyone who wants to can look up what you owned, what you owed, and who you left things to. And attorneys and court fees during probate can eat up anywhere from 3 to 8% of your estate's total value before a single dollar reaches your family. On a $400,000 estate, that is between $12,000 and $32,000 quietly disappearing into a legal process before your kids see any of it. Now let's talk about trusts, because this is where people's eyes either light up or glaze over. And I want to make sure yours light up because this stuff genuinely matters. A trust is a legal arrangement where you transfer ownership of your assets, your house, your accounts, your investments, whatever you put into it, into the trust itself, which is then managed by someone called a trustee, who can be you while you are alive and someone you designate after you are gone. The trust has instructions built into it for exactly how and when assets get distributed to your beneficiaries. And here is the big, beautiful difference between a will and a trust. Assets held inside a trust completely bypass probate. No waiting, no court supervision, no public record, no 3 to 8% disappearing into legal fees. When you die, the trustee simply follows the instructions already written into the document and distributes the assets directly to your family, often within weeks instead of over a year. For parents specifically, that control piece is the part worth really sitting with. A will says, here is who gets my stuff. A trust says, here is who gets my stuff, here is exactly when they get it, here is what they can and cannot use it for, and here is what happens if any of those conditions are not met. If you have a 17-year-old, do you actually want them to receive a full inheritance the moment they turn 18? Because a will, once probate wraps up, writes the check. A trust lets you say they get a portion at 25, another portion at 30, and the remainder when they hit 35. And in the meantime, the money can only be used for education or housing or healthcare. You are essentially writing a letter from your future self to your children that arrives with actual legal teeth behind it instead of just good intentions. Let's talk about the cost difference, because this comes up every single time, and it matters. A basic will typically costs somewhere between $300 and $1,000 to have drafted by an attorney. A revocable living trust, which is the most common type for families, typically runs between $1,500 and $3,000 and sometimes more depending on how complex your situation is and where you live. So yes, a trust costs more upfront. But here is the math that reframes that completely. If your estate goes through probate because you only had a will, and the average probate cost runs around 4 to 5% of the estate's value, and you have a $300,000 home plus retirement accounts plus savings, you are potentially looking at $12,000 to $15,000 in probate costs that a trust would have eliminated entirely. The trust that cost you $2,000 upfront just saved your family $10,000 to $13,000 on the back end. That is not a close call once you actually run the numbers. Now here is a mistake that trips up even the people who do the right thing and set up a trust. They create the trust, they sign all the paperwork, they feel very responsible and organized about the whole thing, and then they never actually fund it. Funding the trust means retitling your assets so that the trust legally owns them instead of you owning them personally. Your house needs to be deeded into the trust. Your bank accounts need to list the trust as the owner. Your investment accounts need to be retitled. If you set up a trust and then leave all of your assets sitting in your own name, those assets still go through probate when you die because they were never actually inside the trust. The trust is an empty container if you do not put anything in it. This is one of the most common and most avoidable estate planning mistakes that exists, and it happens constantly because the attorney hands you the finished trust documents, and people assume that means everything is taken care of. It is not taken care of until the assets are actually in it. Let's talk about the guardian piece specifically, because for parents of young children, this is often the most emotional part of the whole conversation, and also the most important. A will is the only place where you legally name a guardian for your minor children. A trust does not do this. So even if you set up a comprehensive trust, you still need a will alongside it specifically to name who raises your kids if something happens to both parents. And if you have no will at all, that decision goes to a judge who will consider what is in the best interest of the children based on whatever information is available, which may or may not align with what you would have chosen. The aunt you adore and trust completely might not be who the court lands on. The family member you specifically would not have chosen might be exactly who ends up raising your children simply because nothing was written down. Writing it down is the whole job here. That is the entire point of both of these documents. You are writing down your decisions so that nobody else has to make them for you at the worst possible moment. Here is another piece that people skip, and really should not. Beneficiary designations. Your retirement accounts, your life insurance, your bank accounts with a payable on death designation, these assets pass directly to whoever you named as beneficiary on those individual accounts, and they completely bypass both your will and your trust. It does not matter what your will says. If your 401k has an ex-spouse listed as beneficiary because you set it up 15 years ago and forgot to update it, that ex-spouse is getting that money. Full stop. Keeping your beneficiary designations current and consistent with the rest of your estate plan is not optional maintenance. It is foundational. Go check yours right now, not next month, right now, because this is the most common way estate plans fall apart even when the will and trust are perfectly written. So let's bring this all the way home with the honest, practical answer to the question in the title. Which one do you actually need? Here is the real breakdown. If you have minor children, you need both. You need a trust to keep your assets out of probate and to control how and when your children receive their inheritance. And you need a will alongside it to name their guardian, because a trust cannot do that. If you are single with no kids and a relatively simple financial life, a basic will is a perfectly solid starting point and is enormously better than nothing. If you own real estate, have significant savings or investments, have children from a previous relationship, have a blended family, or have any situation with even a small amount of complexity, a trust is almost certainly worth the extra upfront cost for everything it protects your family from on the back end. And here is the most important thing this entire video has been building toward. The best will or the best trust in the world is the one that actually exists. A perfect estate plan you intended to create but never got around to is worth exactly nothing to your family when they need it. The discomfort of sitting down and thinking about your own mortality for a few hours is genuinely small compared to what you are handing your children and your family by getting it done. You are giving them clarity at the worst possible time. You are giving them a path through grief instead of a legal mess on top of it. You are making a decision today that protects people you love from a situation they should never have to navigate. Schedule the appointment, call the attorney, or at minimum, get a will in place through a reputable online service this week. If cost is a barrier right now, because something is always better than nothing, and you can upgrade the plan later when you are ready. Your family deserves to know you took care of this. And honestly, once it is done, the relief is real. It is one of those things that hangs over you in the background until it is finished, and then you wonder why you waited so long. If this finally made estate planning feel less overwhelming and more like something you can actually do, that is exactly why this channel exists. We break down the money stuff that matters and make it feel like a real conversation instead of a textbook. We are still a small channel just getting started on our way to our first 1,000 subscribers. So if you found this helpful, hitting subscribe takes 2 seconds and it genuinely means everything to us. Thank you so much for watching all the way through. I will see you in the next video.